Hello, everybody. Okay, so we are going to have some fun. We're talking the monomyth, which is one of the great interests of my personal storytelling life is working with mythological storytelling. So we're gonna have a raucous good time with this. We're gonna talk Star Wars. We're gonna talk Harry Potter. We're gonna talk some of the great hero myths of all time. All right, because when we get into the woman warrior next week, what we're going to find almost immediately is that the author, Maxine Hong Kingston, is trying to frame her experience of life in some way that is reminiscent of a hero type myth. And she's going to do it in some really interesting ways. And so, before we can really appreciate what she's actually trying to do, we have to try to understand how myth works, and especially how hero myths work, how they function. So, we spent the last couple of days talking about myth, what it is, how it functions. We talked about sort of the difference between things like folklore, things like fairy tales, theories, common misconceptions, and narrative stories that function on the level of myth. So a myth is it's folklore, okay, that plays a foundational role in a society. So we were talking about David and Goliath. Okay, the story of David plays this foundational role not only in Jewish culture, but in all of Western civilization. We all trace our sort of cultural lineage back to the values that are being transmitted through the power of this myth of David. Okay. Um, it is it is symbolic storytelling. Okay. And so in order to be a functional myth, number one, it does need to be a story. There needs to be a narrative. Usually that narrative involves a hero of some type. It can involve gods and goddesses and monsters and all kinds of fantastic things. It can be um, a historical figure whose experience has been exaggerated in some grand way that now exists in our imaginations in a way that is just sort of makes them above and beyond anything that's possible for an actual living human being. But the story of their experiences in this now mythical retelling of who they were just captures us, and it communicates a set of values to us that is being passed down through the generation. So remember, I talked about Daniel Boone and Eliot Ness and the stories of these like all American, manly men, and how this is not always a positive thing, but it is an incredibly powerful thing, and it is one of the most just sort of inescapable forces of human civilization. Okay, so myth is very, very important. It is one of the most powerful things that we do with language is create and retell myths throughout the years, throughout the generations. Okay? So uh, just to review, we talked about Joseph Campbell's four functions of mythology. So, not every myth needs to function on all four of these levels. The more modern myths that we have been, telling ourselves lately don't necessarily hit the first two of these, though a really good, profound, powerful myth is going to deal with all four of these things in some way for the most important ones that we have. Okay, so remember, the function of mythology can be metaphysical, meaning it is inviting us uh, to experience the wonder and awe of our existence. It can be very commonly, it's going to be cosmological in some way. So most myths are going to have a cosmological function in that they give us some sort of symbolic representation for how the world came to be the way it is. And this can be how a, a nation of people came to be the way they are, right? In the way that we talked about David, his attributes are part of the foundation myth of the Jewish people and of Western civilization. Okay, it can be sociological, meaning it's meant to pass down a set of laws, a set of of moral or ethical behavior that new generations are supposed to follow. And so myths tend to be highly, highly conservative things. These are things that the leaders of a group of people, the establishment, the institutional wisdom of a given group of people wants to pass down uh, to subsequent generations to keep things working the way they have always worked. Okay, so in this way, myths tend to be rather conservative in their outlook. Right? You don't create myths to tell brand new progressive modes of thought. Right? So they do function in that way to pass down traditions, morals, and ethics. And then also there is this pedagogical function. Which can be a little difficult to understand sometimes, but a lot of myths serve as a guide for people for the best way to transition through the various stages of life. So we see in an awful lot of hero myths, particularly, we see episodes in the big stories that can sort of symbolically represent various stages in a standard human life cycle. Birth and growing up and coming of age, first falling in love, first sexual experiences, marriage, children, maturity, and then sliding into old age and slipping back into dependence and ultimately experiencing death. That cycle can be charted through the events of most hero myths that are really profound. And so if you look at them in that way, you can often see like a human life cycle playing out in some of these myths. So what we're going to talk about here. It's not a template. It's not a formula for how myths work. It's just something that if we look at the mythological traditions from many, many different cultures all around the world, we start to notice patterns. And this guy named Joseph Campbell was the most important recent scholar in this field who really articulated how these patterns tend to play out across different cultures in ways that we can look at and start to notice why mythology tends to be meaningful for us. And what he's most famous for identifying is what we call the monomyth. Um, Often known as the hero's journey. Okay, so oftentimes throughout, this lecture, I'm going to refer to it a lot as the hero's journey. So what we mean by the monomyth is that, in a nutshell, if you look at cultures all around the world, there's this curious tendency that we have to just keep telling the same basic myth over and over and over again from a lot of different perspectives. They have a lot of different sort of cultural idiosyncrasies to them, but in a nutshell, we've been telling the same basic story, for thousands and thousands of years. The Star Wars is basically the same story as the ancient, Indian story of the Ramayana, which is basically the same story as the story of King David, which is basically similar to the story of Jesus of Nazareth, which is basically similar to Beowulf, right? It's there's an awful lot that we just keep retelling over and over and over and over again, and um, there are all kinds of reasons we can get into for why we think that may be. A lot of it has to do with trying to examine our own psychological makeup. What Joseph Campbell laid out here, what we're going to look at, is very, very intricately connected to uh, different forms of psychological inquiry. So especially related to the theories of a psychologist named Carl Jung. And you don't have to know this, don't freak out. We're not going to get into a bunch of psychological terms here. But Carl Jung's understanding of, or at least the way he tried to communicate the way that the human psyche worked, played out in using a lot of the same characters that we're going to see in this monomyth. And so Joseph Campbell's the way he articulated the hero's journey is very closely related to Jungian psychology. But so this hero's journey, this monomyth, and by monomyth we just mean the one myth, right? No matter where you are, what culture you're part of, we're all just kind of retelling one myth about how things came to be, about what a hero is, about what people need in order to move through the various stages of life. This is like the story of how human beings tell, the adventure of being human. Right. So it describes this common heroic narrative in which this hero protagonist um, sets out on a journey, okay, has these really transformative adventures, and then returns home with usually with some sort of prize or something called a boon, a reward for going on this journey. And it's this useful sort of formula for comparing folkloric, literary, mythological, sometimes psychological, sometimes religious traditions across time frames and across many, many different cultures. And basically, here it is. This is a little bit more detailed than the one I'm going to have you work with in your homework for this weekend. There are a few extra steps here, but I use this because I just sort of I like the way that this lays out the journey of the hero in a very clear way. So it's you notice it's not a line. It's kind of like a snail shell or a corkscrew. Okay, our hero um, starts out and then goes kind of around through a new magical world and then ends up coming back to his ordinary world, but in sort of an elevated state of being so that he returns sort of greater than he was when he left. And this is sort of the best visualization of that journey. So um, I'm going to take you through these steps here. And my favorite hero story is Star Wars, so I'm gonna talk about Star Wars. I also in the asynchronous folder I left you a chart of the 12 major steps of the hero's journey that I broke down using Harry Potter for you, because I know most of you probably prefer Harry Potter to Star Wars because kids today and whatnot. But anyway, Star Wars is better. I don't care. Star Wars is a better story than Harry Potter. So we're gonna take you through this. I'm gonna just sort of describe each of these steps using Luke Skywalker as our hero. And believe it or not, you can take the steps of this journey that Luke Skywalker goes on, and you can substitute David. You can substitute King Arthur. You can substitute Beowulf. You can substitute any number of very classical mythological heroes, and they all go on the same basic set of steps here. It's really fascinating when you start to think how and why that is. We only have one basic story that we keep telling ourselves, and this is it. So here is the monomyth, or the hero's journey. So a hero is someone we usually meet in their ordinary world. Okay, and so for Luke Skywalker, he's basically a whiny punk kid who lives on a moisture farm on this desert planet Tatooine, and he's bored. He wants to leave home. He wants to go out and have adventures. Okay, in this ordinary world step here, we usually learn that our hero has some sort of special birth. Notice Luke Skywalker doesn't have parents. He doesn't know what happened to them. It's a great mystery. Harry Potter's the same way. What happened to his parents? A lot of heroes have sort of a magical birth story, a virgin birth, something that makes their birth special and out of the ordinary. But we meet them in this normal world where they're just going through their daily life until they get what's called this call to adventure. Okay, so our hero is not really happy in the ordinary world. They long for something more, something greater, until this call to adventure comes along. And this usually takes the form of some sort of announcement that something is wrong in the ordinary world. Everyone's dying, the fire has gone out, they need a magic amulet, something like that. Okay. And in Star Wars, the call to adventure comes to Luke Skywalker in the form of the two droids, C3PO and R2D2. And they show up one day after Uncle Owen buys them, and Luke is cleaning them, and he's complaining about how much he wants to get out of this, off this boring farm and go have adventures. And suddenly, boom, the video shoots out of R2D2, the little hologram that shows Princess Leia saying, "Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope." Okay, and that is Luke's call to adventure. It's an announcement that there is this more exciting world of adventure out there for him. There's a princess who needs to be rescued, literally. Okay, so it's calling him to this adventure. So Luke decides, well, he doesn't know Obi-Wan Kenobi, but he knows some guy named Ben Kenobi. So he'll take these droids over to this Ben Kenobi and see if he knows what's going on here. All right. So Luke sets out with his droids to go see Ben Kenobi, and um, and Ben gives him some basic information here, right? He tells him his father was not really who his uncle said he was. He was actually, he was someone more important who was murdered by this guy named Darth Vader. He was a Jedi. He tells him he was a Jedi Knight, and he gives him his lightsaber. Okay, so in Star Wars, there's a little bit of a muddiness around the call to adventure and the refusal and the meeting the mentor. But usually in this group, this set of narrative steps, the hero will get this call, and that will bring them to a mentor character. This is a very important character. So in Harry Potter, this mentor character is going to be Hagrid. And then later on, it will be Dumbledore. In The Lord of the Rings, it's who's the wizard guy? The wizard guy in the hat. I forget his name. I was like, "There, you shall not pass," guy. You know what I'm talking about. So in the Jesus story, it's John the Baptist. In King David, I believe the first mentor David has is Saul. So the mentor is this person whose job, narratively speaking, is to tell the hero about the call to adventure, is to tell the hero about the world that they're about to enter and about all the dangers that they're going to face. And usually the mentor gives the hero their magic weapon. Okay. And this magic weapon can take all kinds of different forms. The Obi-Wan Kenobi gives Luke his lightsaber, and it's his magic weapon that will carry him throughout the rest of the Star Wars epic. Harry Potter, Hagrid takes him to the store to buy his first magic wand. All right, every hero gets their magic weapon, roughly in this time, and it can be a metaphorical magic weapon as well. Wyatt Earp buying his first 6-shooters, the same thing as Luke Skywalker getting his lightsaber. So David, learning to use his slingshot, same thing. Okay. The most important thing here in this general area of the narrative, though, is that your hero is going to refuse the call to adventure. When Obi-Wan Kenobi tells Luke that he's supposed to go on this grand adventure, Luke says no. Okay, so does Harry. Harry doesn't believe all of the letters that are coming inviting him to Hogwarts. The answer is no. They're busy. They have stuff to do. They can't possibly be the hero everyone needs. Okay, and so the hero needs to be convinced to go on the adventure, right? Most mythical heroes don't want to be heroes. That's a very important sort of part of the mythical kind of makeup of an important hero, is they don't want to be heroes. They go on this heroic journey because they have to. And that's part of what makes them great. They're not seeking glory. So Luke says, no, I can't go on this space adventure. Obi-Wan says, look, I know who this Princess Leia person is. I'm going to get these plans. This droid has plans to this weapon. Okay. And so I'm going to go help her, and we need to get these plans to Princess Leia on this other planet. You should come with me because we can have this grand adventure. And Luke says, no, but I'll take you to the spaceport and see you off. Right. Now, on the way back home, however, Luke finds out that the evil empire, the bad guys, have been searching for these droids. and that they have gone to his moisture farm and they've killed his aunt and uncle and like burned everything. Okay. And so he can't go back. He can't go home. He must go forward. So the hero gets the call. The hero then refuses the call because he's not out for glory, but then has no choice but to go forward. Okay. And this works the same way for all of the great mythic heroes, from King Arthur to Beowulf to Jesus to David to Harry Potter and Luke Skywalker. Okay. Um, so Luke then drives. He's like, well, there's this really famous line where Luke literally says, I have to go with you because there's nothing here for me now. So he gets in the speeder with Obi-Wan Kenobi and they drive to the spaceport at Mos Eisley. And this is when they cross in the threshold into this new world of adventure that they're going to spend most of our story in. Okay, so great heroes, they start out in this ordinary world and then they have to cross a threshold into this new magic world of adventure. Um, so, this can be a war, it can be a romance, it can be, anything that is just out of the ordinary, different than what our hero is used to. Mulan, okay, when she joins the army, puts on her father's armor and joins the army. That is her crossing the threshold into the new world of adventure. Okay. And once they cross that threshold, they immediately enter into this series of tests. Okay, so they experience this part of the story we call tests, allies, and enemies. So one of the most famous scenes in Star Wars is the big cantina scene. It's the moment. These things usually occur at some sort of watering hole, bars, space cantinas. Any place where people gather is generally the first place your hero goes when they enter this new world. And they do a couple of things here. There are some early tests that they have to overcome. They have to get past what we call threshold guardians, who are sort of like minor bad guys, um, who are intending to keep the hero out of the magic world, but the hero, this is sort of their first taste of adventure, the overcoming the minor bad guys that they first meet. And they start to learn about the rules of the new world that they're entering. They learn to like use their magic weapon. They start to figure out who's a friend, who's an enemy. It's just sort of the first series of tests. And so in Star Wars, they go to the cantina and they have to hire a pilot to get them off the planet, right? So when we meet Han Solo and Chewbacca, right? And we had this famous scene where they bargain with Han Solo and they make friends with him, but they have to fight their way out of the cantina. So we've got both friends and enemies that they immediately engage with, and they have to sneak past the evil stormtroopers. So you see, there's this sort of first level of minor tests that they have to overcome. Okay. Then our hero goes to this next phase that we call the approach to the inmost cave. Okay, and the inmost cave is just this metaphor that Joseph Campbell used for the place where the hero is going to have to engage in the grand ordeal of the story. And so in really, really old myths, this usually happened by like Beowulf, for example. The hero has to journey to a literal cave in which he will battle a monster of some sort. In Beowulf, it's Grendel, and then Grendel's mother, and then a dragon. So there's three separate sorts of ordeals that he goes through. So this cave can be any number of things. In Star Wars, it's the Death Star, right? So we have this part of the movie where they're in the Millennium Falcon, they're on their way to try to find Princess Leia and Alderaan, and when they get there, the planet has been blown up, right? And they discover that Princess Leia is being held in this Death Star, this space station that's hovering nearby. And they know this is an evil place. They're like, Princess Leia is there. So we're literally approaching this place where the grand ordeal of the story is going to take place. Okay, and so once we they get caught in the tractor beam of the Death Star, right? Which is literally drawing them in. And it's literally like a big black ball, like an actual cave that they're being dragged into. Um, and so when they get there, they split up. Obi-Wan Kenobi is going to go turn off the tractor beam, and Luke and Han Solo figure out where Princess Leia is, and they decide, all right, we're going to go rescue this princess. Okay, and rescuing the princess is the ordeal of this story, and it happens in what we call the abyss, or the inmost cave, right? The place where they are most vulnerable, most surrounded by evil. In Beowulf, this would be Grendel's cave. Um, in uh, in um, in Gilgamesh, right, the ancient Sumerian hero story, there's a cave where they go to fight an actual monster. There's a cave or abyss, you want to call it, in all of these great hero stories. Um, but in Star Wars, they have to go through the bowels of the Death Star to find Princess Leia, in the prison cells, right? And they sneak their way in there, and they rescue the princess, and she's very unimpressed with them. But then, they got to shoot their way out. There's a whole bunch of things here. The technical abyss in Star Wars is the moment when they are trying to fight their way out of the prison block, and they're cut off, and they shoot out a grate and jump through a thing, and they end up in the trash compactor, right? And so not only are they in the cave in the Death Star, surrounded by all the evil bad guys, they're in the bowels of that Death Star, in the actual, like, the dirtiest, most central place you can get, as deep as you can go into the place of evil. That is where the hero is going to end up, right in this midsection of your story. And it is usually here where the hero really faces the greatest danger. So the walls of the trash compactor start closing in on our hero, right? And it is in this moment that we think Luke Skywalker actually dies, because there's a little trash compactor monster who, like, pops up out of the water and grabs him and drags him under, and everybody thinks he's dead. And he is literally reborn from the trash. So somewhere down in this abyss, there will be this symbolic death and rebirth that will take place in the deepest part of the most evil section of this fantastical magic world. And every great hero story has this moment. Okay. But anyway, after going through this ordeal, fighting their way out of the trash compactor, usually somewhere around here, the hero's mentor is going to die, or they are going to leave, because the hero now has to be on his own to complete the rest of the story, right? Mentors almost never go all the way through the story with the character. They're going to be separated. The hero is going to be separated from his mentor somewhere right around this moment. And sure enough, right around this moment, as they fight their way out of the trash compactor and get back to the spaceship, Obi-Wan Kenobi comes face to face with Darth Vader, and he sacrifices himself to Darth Vader so that Luke can escape. Okay, and so now our hero is all on his own, but they got the thing that they came for, right? They got the princess. They have the plans for the Death Star. That is what we call the reward, the ultimate boon. So after going through this ordeal, the hero experiences classically what is called an apotheosis. Okay, and this is an old Greek term meaning the height of power. Okay, so the hero in this moment sort of has finally come to the height of their powers. They realize they're a hero. Okay, and they embrace that identity. They realize, I can do this. I can kill the monster. I can win the war. I can find the treasure, whatever it is. After going through the big ordeal in the abyss, they come to a realization of their full power. And Luke Skywalker demonstrates this as they're, like, flying away from the Death Star. They're being chased by the TIE fighters. They're shooting the spaceship, and Luke gets in the gunner seat and pew pew pew, and he shoots him down, because he's now in full possession of his hero powers, right? Young Luke Skywalker, before going through this ordeal, would have panicked and freaked out and he would have missed. But Luke Skywalker now, he's a fully embodied hero, and he shoots down the TIE fighters who are coming after them and impresses the princess, right? She thinks he's a she thinks he's a real man of action, and she's sort of not impressed with Han Solo. Starts like giving him the stiff arm because ooh, Luke Skywalker, right? So Luke is at his apotheosis, right? So the ultimate boon in Star Wars is the princess and the Death Star plans, okay? And every hero story has this thing that the hero was after the entire time, and now they are escaping away from the place of utmost evil with this prize that they came to get, okay? And there is usually somewhere along the way where there is also a refusal to return. Okay. A lot of times the hero doesn't want to go back to the ordinary world because they think they can make a bigger difference, out here. They don't want to go back to the normal world because they don't want to go back to being normal. They feel a responsibility to stay in the magic world and make a difference in some way. And there's this moment in Star Wars where Luke and Han Solo have this moment where Luke genuinely considers not going with Princess Leia to join the rebellion, that he and Han Solo will just take the money and go off and have adventures of their own together. Okay. But Luke overcomes that. He decides, no, I have to see this mission through to the end, and they begin the road back home. So this means that they are in the process of returning to the normal world. The hero has to get back to the world that he or she left to bring the prize back home. And so in Star Wars, they go to this rebel base that's on some moon. I forget the name of the moon, where they deliver the Death Star plans and Princess Leia to the rebellion, who desperately need both of them in order to defeat the Empire. Okay, so this road back, and usually they're chased by bad guys all the way. Okay, and sure enough, there was a tracking device put on the spaceship, and Darth Vader, the Empire, tracked the Millennium Falcon all the way to this base. So like the Death Star is actually coming to the base to get them. All right. But by this time, our hero has achieved what we call this masterdom of both worlds. So now that he is back with the good guys, okay, that is, it's kind of closer to the ordinary world than the special one. We realize that he is the master of both of them. He is a good guy who belongs with the rebellion, and he has the powers of heroism that are required to take down the worst monsters in the magical world. And you'll see this throughout all of the various hero myths. Gilgamesh especially has a really fantastic scene late in that epic that really brings that concept into light. Beowulf does the same thing when he's a king later on. He's very comfortable partying with the Vikings in the Longhouse, but also he's the only one who can go slay the dragon because he is the master of both. Right. So there's this moment during this period of performing the role of being master of both worlds, in which the hero is sort of symbolically resurrected into this moment of heroism. Okay, and so in Star Wars, this is played out in the moment when they jump back into their spaceships, and they're going to go as a group. Luke is going to be one of the leaders to lead them fly back to the Death Star and blow it up. Okay, so he's not going to stay down. He's not just going to enjoy being safe again. He's going to be symbolically resurrected into the full light of his heroism and go take on the bad guys. Right. And so they fly back to the Death Star, and they have the big space battle, and all it took was like shooting a thing into a hole, and phew, the whole thing would blow up. But he returns with this special knowledge, right? He brings the knowledge of how to defeat this most evil of all space weapons ever invented. And and the reason he's the only one who can do it is because along the way he learned to use the force, instead of the targeting computers, and we didn't go into that, but in the final, the big climactic moment, all the other spaceship pilots have tried to shoot the little thing in the Death Star, and they miss because they didn't know how to use the force, and Luke does. And that's what we mean by the return with the special knowledge in that most crucial of moments when the entire galaxy is on the line. Luke Skywalker is the only one who has the special knowledge, to do what needs to be done, and he gained that special knowledge through the process of going through the ordeal that he had to go through. Okay, and so he then ascends to this higher plane. What I mean, after having succeeded in bringing this special knowledge to the people who need it, he now is fully invested as the hero, as like the mythical force that is Luke Skywalker. And they party, they go back, they celebrate. They have a big ceremony where they all get medals, um, except oddly for Chewbacca, because there's like space Wookiee racism or something. Chewbacca doesn't get his medal, but other than that, that's the basic arc of the monomyth. And you see this exact same thing play out again and again, again and again in all of the various classical myths, that we can really talk about. Right. So you don't have to go through all the really detailed steps that I just took you through. But for homework, I'm going to give you an exercise where you go through the 12 basic steps of the hero's journey. And those are the ordinary world, the call to adventure, the refusal of the call in meeting the mentor, and then crossing the threshold into the magical world, meeting the guardians, the threshold guardians, battling some minor enemies, figuring out who the allies are, the general like first tests, then approaching the inmost cave, uh, and then having the ordeal, the grand ordeal at the heart of this adventure in the inmost cave, in the abyss. Okay, and then coming out the other side of that ordeal, achieving the apotheosis and bringing with the hero the big reward that he or she was after all along. All right, and then they travel the road back to the ordinary world. They are symbolically resurrected and bring the elixir, the special knowledge, to the ordinary world. Okay, so here are some really popular hero myths, and what I'm giving you for homework is this chart that I want you to fill out. I gave you 3 heroes. I gave you, I forget which ones I put on there. I think David and Beowulf and Mulan. So I want you to look up those heroes, look them up on Wikipedia, whatever, and just see if you can lay out the 12 basic steps of those hero myths, on this chart. And then I want you to pick a 4th one, anyone you want. It could be, I mean, literally anyone. Use your imagination, pick somebody fun. You can use the list I gave you here. I gave you some really classical mythological heroes on the left side here: David and Arthur, Mulan. Sundiata is a sort of a mythical hero from Malawi in Africa. I gave you Jesus. I gave you Ramayana, which is an epic Indian hero myth, and also Yamato from Japan. And then we have some American myths, and these are over here: Christopher Columbus, George Washington. These are real people, okay, but they exist in our imaginations, in a heightened mythological form. You think about the way we treat the memory of these people, the memory of their exploits in our popular imaginations. It's not history. It's not the actual way that things went down. We think about them in this monomythic form as a hero's journey. So think about not the actual history of George Washington and his exploits, but what is the mythical story of George Washington that we hold in our imaginations. He's a mythical hero for us. Daniel Boone, the same way. Crazy Horse, Wyatt Earp, they exist as sort of mythical forces in the American story, and it's through those stories that we come to some sort of understanding about who we are as a people, right? For for better and sometimes for worse. There are a lot of negative things in these stories, but they are things that also tell us who we are for, in negative ways, right? And you know I don't want to get overly political here, but I want you to think about the way that Donald Trump organizes his messaging. Think about how he's always trying to, have doctors say he has like magic genes and stuff. He's trying to fill in the blank spaces in the hero's journey, because he wants to project that kind of mythical weight. That's not by accident. Okay, this is a very like sort of fundamental thing, in any society. So think about who you want to pick for your fourth hero, and fill out that chart. And uh, I will do um, office hours Thursday evening. I believe I'm going to do it at 7 p.m., but look for the update on Schoology, and let me know if you have any questions. And otherwise, I will see you next week.